You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Good evening and welcome to the Boys in the Booth podcast, episode 132. Cody, Melbourne, and Abrams with you post NHL entry draft, which occurred over the weekend at the Bell Center in Montreal. What a crazy weekend it was. And we look forward to free agency starting on Wednesday. So first of all, how we doing, guys?
Well, you know, I'm a little insulted. I am, in fact, recording in the Big Smoke, Toronto tonight, and Chad didn't even invite me over to record in person with him, so it's a little weird, but yeah, I mean, what else can you say? It's insulting.
I wanted to keep your stench out of the house, Case. That devil's stench, I wanted to keep it out. This is a Seattle Kraken stench house only, and that's all we accept. I'm doing well, guys. I got all my merchandise in today. You can see my Boys in the Booth attire that I'm wearing. I got 2 t-shirts, 2 hats. Very excited. I just wish I added a 5th item to my order because we have slides now available on the website, boysinthebooth.com, and tons of other stuff. So go there and check it out and get lots of free merch. But yeah, not free. Sorry. Lots of good merch. Not free. My bad. Good stuff in the works too. We've got 2 announcements coming up, but I don't think I can spoil it quite yet. So maybe next week, hopefully by then, we'll be able to talk about it. And then, of course, the Pepsi Cup is coming up. That's why you see Casey is growing out a bit of a mustache, the multiple scoregasms. That's my team. We're just going to be mustache guys, and we're going to try to get the job done. And yeah, so everything's good right now. Harp, how about you?
Cool. Yeah, everything's good, man. Lots to look forward to as we are well into July here, and the weather's been fantastic. And again, what a weekend that was in Montreal. Of course, I recorded a little video on Friday before day 2 of the draft got started, and just how crazy round 1 was. And, you know, a few of the highlights, of course, earlier in the day, Alex DeBrincat going from the Chicago Blackhawks to the Ottawa Senators, and the fact that Chicago goes into the first round of the draft without a single pick, and they end up with 3, and they are going all in on Connor Bedard in 2023. That's for sure. It'll be them and Arizona fighting for that number 1 pick, and then of course you had the Canadiens going with Uri Slafkovsky, the Devils taking Simon Nemec, of course. So cool to see for the first time ever 2 Slovaks going 1 and 2 overall in the draft. First time ever. There were 6 total Slovakian players that went in the draft, and 2 of them went in the top 3. So that is pretty cool. And Shane Wright, of course, falling to number 4 to the Seattle Kraken. We'll get into that with our guest a little bit later, and some Habs talk. They made a couple of big deals as well. Alexander Romanov to the New York Islanders, and they get Kirby Dach from the Chicago Blackhawks. So what a wild weekend. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that Brockville's own Gavin White, who had a great year with the Hamilton Bulldogs, was drafted in the 4th round by the Dallas Stars. So congrats to him. I've been talking to him a little bit, and we hope to get him on at some point. So it was a fantastic weekend. And now what we're going to do is quickly say who we think is the team that won the draft weekend, and so we'll get into that now, and then we'll get to our special guest afterwards. So, Case, let's go to you first with your draft winner from the weekend.
Yeah, I'm going to be quick with it. No suspense here. Columbus Blue Jackets are my draft winner this year. Sounds like Chad went down the same road as me from that.
I've got 2 though. Go on.
All right. Well, I mean, first of all, their first pick, the 6th pick, I want to mention that this is Chicago's pick, acquired in the Seth Jones trade, where Columbus took them to the Cleaners. And they went with David Jiricek, who is the 2nd best defenseman in this draft, and maybe only the 2nd best because of a bad injury last year. Who knows what he could have done with the rest of the year. From 2017 to 2020, Columbus drafted That's 4 drafts. The highest D-man they picked was 78th. Their prospect pool on the D end is weak. So this is exactly what they needed. It's exactly the guy I projected them to pick. So I'm really happy that they went out and got him. Moving on to their next pick, pick 12, Denton Matejchuk. They continued to add to that deep pool I was talking about. Had a higher points per game than Korchinski, who was picked at 7th and had 13 goals compared to his 4 goals. This guy is going to be dynamic on the power play and should play well alongside Juracek. So I'm excited for them there. I think that's another guy that they picked exactly where he belonged in the draft. There wasn't a reach. It wasn't, a huge value pick either, but right where he belongs. Now, they start getting more value when they get onto the second round. Their pick 44, Luca Del Bellauz. What a name.
Great name.
All name team, that's for sure. 6'1", 180 center. Only OHL players picked in this draft with more points than him was Shane Wright and Tucker Robinson, which is an absolute steal of a pick for Seattle. NHL Scouting had him ranked the 8th best North American skater, and Button and McKenzie had them at 23 and 29 respectively. This is a value pick at number 44. They're going to be really happy about that one, I think. But so I found a lot to like about Columbus's draft when I started digging in to look a little deeper, but this is why I started looking into Columbus, and that's Jordan Dumais. I sent you guys a message on the side, just blown away about this guy and how late he was going to slip with the rankings. He was third in the league in scoring as a 17-year-old in the Q, where he had 39 goals, 100 assists. I've lost my stats, for 109 points in 68 games. The closest guys on his teams were 88 points and 65 points. He was also the QMJHL and CHL Sportsman Player of the Year. What is there not to like about this guy? I'll tell you exactly what. NHL scouts do not like a 5'9", 165 winger. They still have not come around to that, and it blows my mind. He could be the next DeBrincat, and we're letting him slip to the 3rd round. It's unbelievable to me.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there, Case. You finished with Columbus, or do you want to keep?
Oh, I'm still going.
Okay, all right.
That was great.
All right, let's keep going.
Next
then.
Pick, 4th round, 6'6", 238-pound right winger from Russia with 28 points in 33 games in the WHL. Why not take a swing? After that, round 5, Sergei Ivanov. Always take a swing at a goalie this late in the draft. Why not? Well, this one wasn't even a swing. 928 save percentage in 26 MHL games, 931 save percentage in 16 in the playoffs to lead the league. That is not a swing at a goalie at all. He might be the steal out of all the goalies in a weak draft for goaltending. And then their last pick, James Fisher, was a high schooler that they picked, full-bodied high schooler. I'll tell you that. He's 6'1", 198 pounds or something like that. Ranked 99th in North American skaters, and 198 and 96, those players all went in the 4th and 5th rounds. So I think that they got value in every one of their picks. They did not miss, and I don't know, I was really excited to see Jordan Dumais go to Columbus. Yeah, that was a lot.
No, Case, that was great. But
that was great, yeah.
You kind of figured it out. I was also going to say Columbus. I think they won this draft, and I didn't even go that deep into it. I just liked the 4 guys that they picked, their first 4 picks. It made total sense to take Juracek at 6. Like you mentioned, probably the 2nd best defenseman in the draft. That's also where I had him on my draft ranking at 6. So that was great. Denton Matejchuk at 12. You guys know that I thought it would have been a bit of an off-the-board pick if he went in the top 10, but that's where I had him on my draft ranking because I was high on the player. I thought he was just as good as Korchinski, who went before him. Extremely similar production, both in the WHL, so I thought that was a great pick at 12. And like you said, the Columbus Blue Jackets have Chicago to thank for basically building their entire back end now. So they've got Boquist there. They don't have Seth Jones anymore. He's on Chicago, overpaid, probably going to get traded, and that's just, he's never going to live up to that contract, unfortunately, because it's just too much. But so now they have Boquist on the back end. You've got Juracek, and you've got Matejchuk as well. So that's 3 absolute studs on the back end, and you can thank Chicago for that. And then, the third pick there that they took 44th overall, Luca Del Beluz. That was a guy on the radar for the Leafs to take late in the first round at 25. There was a lot of chatter about this player. And I don't know the reason why he sort of slipped this far, but like you mentioned, he was projected to go either late first round or early second round, and so that's a good value pick there. And then Dumais, you talked about the production there, and that's their fourth pick at 96th overall. Just made total sense. Columbus is a team that's not afraid to take a swing on players who might be undersized. You see that in this draft, even with their goalie, who's only 5'11", which there's only, I think, one current NHL goalie under 6 feet, and that's UC Saros, and he was one of the best goalies in the league last year and the year before. So listen, man, like, I know height, weight, size, can do a lot for you. And we saw that in the first pick by the Canadiens. They went with the big 6'4" power forward and in Slafkovsky instead of the 6 foot, two-way player in Shane Wright. But I don't know, man. At a certain point, you got to start looking at skill and value. And that's what Columbus did all draft long. So I absolutely loved it. So they were my number one for sure. Honorable mention for me, though, has to go to this team right behind me on the wall, the Seattle Kraken. Getting Shane Wright at 4th overall was an absolute steal. There's been a lot of talk about that pick, and we're going to get into that when Allan Etmanski joins us later in the show, because obviously he's a big Habs guy. But getting Shane Wright at 4 was incredible. I don't think Seattle even thought that was a possibility at all. And even the teams before them, New Jersey at 2, it was pretty clear they wanted a defenseman. I don't think we knew that going in, but it was pretty clear they had their guy. And then for Arizona at 3, when they took Cooley, it was like they probably didn't even interview Shane Wright. They probably didn't have him on the radar because I didn't think they'd get an opportunity. So then when it comes time to pick between Shane Wright, a guy you really don't know, and Logan Cooley, a guy who you've been thinking is going to be the next Arizona Coyote for the last, however many months, because he's been slotted at that number 3 spot forever, you're kind of just more familiar with Cooley. And I think that's why they made that pick. And then Seattle just goes, oh, this is great. Shane Wright could be a generational player falling into our laps here. Like, that's fantastic. And then they also picked up Jagger Firkus in the second round there at 35th overall, which I thought was another excellent pick. So honorable mention to Seattle there.
Also on the all teams name is Jagger Firkus, first of all.
That guy looks like a Jagger Firkus too.
So I mean, we talked about when we did the projections, I had Seattle taking a defenseman because it's a great way to build through the draft. But that's because the two best centermen were already taken in Shane Wright and Logan Cooley. Yeah. But the total best way to build a team is through the middle. And we've seen that countless times in the NHL. And while Matty Beniers and Shane Wright up the middle to start your franchise out, like, that's a good way to do it. That's for sure. I mean, Vegas certainly doesn't have that center strength that you're seeing in Seattle being built. We haven't seen it yet, but it's going to come. And Chad, the one more that I pointed out was Tucker Robertson, who was second in OHL scoring in this draft, and they got him in the 4th round. So that's another absolute steal for them. Yeah.
So was he an overager case? Like, was he 19 this year to get drafted? Is that why he led scoring and dropped so far? Like, I didn't.
Yeah, he was 19. Like, okay. He's not going to score that many points and then go in the 4th round in a regular draft. But I still think that, after a OHL season where we saw no one play a game, this was going to happen with an overage player.
Yeah, I understand why, a guy like that will fall because he's a year older than everybody else, but still putting up great numbers. But at a certain point, like, don't you think that's just a positive because he's a year closer to playing in the NHL? Like, I know you can say, oh, he didn't produce in his previous years when he was younger compared to like his draft class, but I don't know, man. Like, as a team that wants to contend, I think the quicker you can get a player into the league, the better.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. No. Like I said, with them not playing a single game the year before, like, who knows what Tucker Robertson would have done last year and where he would have been drafted in 2021. So exactly. I think it's easier to take a swing on an overage player in this year than any other year.
Totally. So those are my two. It's Columbus number one, and then honorable mention has to go to Seattle, and that's why I had the jersey up there, because I just loved it. Shane Wright at 4, like, that's incredible, guys.
Yeah, and they definitely had the capital in the second round. They had multiple picks, and Jagger Furcus off the board right away early in the second round. That's a great pick as well. And I loved everything you said about Columbus as well, Case. You know, they were in talks with the team that I'm about to talk about as my winner for a defenseman, but I like how they stuck with their picks. They addressed an organizational need. You look at their back end for the future. Werenski and Boquist are already in that lineup. They drafted Corson Kuhlmans last year. Now they've got Matejchuk and Juracek. Man, oh man, that back end is going to be good for a long time. And
my favorite player in their D system, Harper, is Stanislaus Fossil, the guy I've talked about countless times at the World Juniors, and we all know how much I love him. So
the all-name team.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'll get to my winner quickly now before we get to Allan Etmanski here on the podcast. And I know you guys may disagree with this one a little bit. I've mentioned it before, but I'm going to go with the Arizona Coyotes as my winner from draft weekend. This was obviously a big draft for them. They had 7 picks in the first 2 rounds. They ended up making a couple of trades during the first round of the NHL draft. And so at number 3, they take the guy that I predicted they would take in Logan Cooley, maybe the most skilled, dynamic player in the draft, has all the tools to be a number 1 center in the National Hockey League. And then they trade up and they get Connor Geekie as well, a big 6'4" center. He was projected, I think, to go to Winnipeg, just outside the top 10. They grab him at 11 in the deal that they made with the San Jose Sharks to get that pick. Like you said, Case, you got to build a winning team down the middle, and Bill Armstrong has talked about that countless times, and that's what they did. And then they make a deal with Edmonton to take on Cassian's contract. They flip picks later on in the first round. They get a couple of future picks as well for taking on Cassian's $3.2 million cap hit, and they draft big 6'7" defenseman Maverick Lamoureux. And I found it really interesting what Armstrong had to say about him. Armstrong, of course, was in St. Louis before he got to Arizona, and he sees this kid potentially as the next Colton Parayko. So how can you not like that first round if you're a Coyotes fan? Then you go into the other rounds. I'm just going to mention a couple of players really quick. Julian Lutz from Germany, a talented left winger. They took him in the second round, 43rd overall, played in Munich with JJ Peterka, so a talented German winger. And then Jeremy Langlois, another talented player out of the QMJHL, and they grabbed him in the third round, 94th overall, and he had 47 points last year as a defenseman for them. So maybe the biggest draft in franchise history for the Coyotes, and I thought they had a great first round, a couple of great picks later on, and this rebuild continues. I thought it was a great weekend for Bill Armstrong and company in Arizona.
Well, I think it was a great weekend for Arizona just to be getting more prospects in the prospect pool. They've had some troubles in the past, and I think it's a good year for them when they're not cheating as well. So that's a quick win off the bat for them. Definitely love the 2 center picks. Always want to build the team down the middle. I said it before. And we knew that they were going to make some sort of move to bring in more cap because they need to be above the cap floor. They're going to bring in more cap and pick up a first round pick. I did not see it being Zach Cassian. That one kind of blew my mind, but it's another smart move. You're not winning next year. Just take on the cap, buy the player out eventually, and get another pick. I think they reached a little bit on Maverick Lamoureux, but where do you put the value on a 6'7" defenseman? That's not something you come across every day. So it'll be interesting to see his development throughout the years.
Yeah, guys, just before I chime in on this, we've got some breaking news that I think will shock you guys, to be honest. This was a free agent that Did we talk about him in our episode? We might have, or maybe not, but it was a notable free agent. Re-signed with Colorado. It's Valeri Nichushkin, 8 years, $6.125 million is the AAV, boys. That seems like an overpay.
Wow. That is a big ticket. And, of course, big change in the front office for the Avalanche today. Joe Sakic moving up to president of hockey ops, Chris McFarland, now the general manager. And, on the day he gets promoted to GM, makes a huge move, re-signing Nichushkin. That is a big ticket.
Well, I wouldn't say that it was... I wouldn't say that Joe Sakic wasn't completely involved with this. I think this was more of Colorado just saying we'd rather not lose our guy, so we'll promote Sakic. You know what I mean? But
for sure.
But anyways, I just saw that and wanted to put that in. So sorry for the rude interruption as we're talking about Arizona, but I just thought that was crazy. I just got it sent to me, and my buddy Nathan just said, "What an overpay!" And oh god,
I know it's tough. Like, they had to pick between him and Burakovsky. I bet you Burakovsky was asking a lot more than that with his point production this year. And Nichushkin became such a stud for them in the playoffs.
He did. I'm just worried about the term.
I think he's deserved such a raise. Like, I mean, you're dropping Burakovsky's contract at $4.9 million, so you give Nichushkin a little bit of a raise on that cap hit. It's like, it's not unbelievable to me, but maybe a little more than I'm comfortable paying him. And now let's see what they can do about Kadri.
Chad, quick thought on Arizona, and then let's get to Allan.
Yes, okay. Personally, I did not like their first round at all. I liked the moves that they did in the first round. Getting the 11th pick, and what was the other one? Oh, the 29th pick from Edmonton to take on Cassian's contract. I liked the moves. I just thought they missed on the pick. So first of all, Logan Cooley is a no-brainer at number 3. I mean, I guess you could have taken Shane Wright, but like I already mentioned, I think they already had Cooley, in mind, and they knew him, and they just wanted to go with that. But Geeky at 11, I look at some of the players taken after him, and especially centers, because if that's what they really wanted. I think Frank Nazar, who was taken just 2 picks later, is a better piece. And I think Noah Ostlund, taken by the Sabres at 16, is a better pick if you want a center. Other than that, though, there was also Lekaramaki at 15, Kemmel still available, even Liam Ogren on the table at that point. I just think that, not that Connor Geeky's a bad pick. I just think there were players with maybe higher upsides that you could have taken a swing on, especially because you have 3 picks. And speaking in the same vein there, at 29, they took a swing at Maverick Lamoureux, but only because he's 6'7", and to me, that just didn't make sense. I think there were 2 players who went directly after who could have been a way better pick. That's Brad Lambert or Isaac Howard. I just think they have higher ceilings. And if you have 3 first-round picks, at least one of them you have to take a swing on a player that's not the safe pick, or isn't the guy you're taking because he's massive. I just thought they made poor decisions on the draft floor in terms of who they picked, but I did like the idea of taking on that cap and getting value in return. So if they didn't do that, they wouldn't have the picks in the first place. So kind of a mixed bag for me with Arizona, but I definitely think they could have done better on the draft floor.
I think it's all right when you think in terms of just sheer numbers of players that they picked up this last week. And Geeky is, from what I've heard, a guy who really benefited from the draft combine. And I heard that his stock rose quite a bit. So maybe they saw something in him they liked a lot. Maybe they spent a lot of time with that team, because there's also Matthew Savoy to watch there. So I don't know. It's all about what the team likes.
Yeah, and not saying Geeky was a bad pick. I just think that might have been, there might have just been some more skilled players on the table. And if you're Arizona, it really depends how you want to build your team. If it were me, I'd build through skill. It seems like Arizona wants to build through size. We'll see what works out. We've seen both win in the NHL. So,
all right, there we go. Our 3 winners from NHL Entry Draft weekend. We look forward to free agency coming up on Wednesday. And now we'll get to one of our favorite guys to have on the podcast, assistant GM of the Picton Pirates and the voice of the Kingston Frontenacs and the RMC Paladins, Mr. Allan Etmanski, coming up. All right, our NHL Entry Draft recap episode 132 of the podcast continues here, and joining us, one of our favorite, most popular guests. He's the assistant GM of the Picton Pirates and the voice of the Kingston Frontenacs of the OHL and the RMC Paladins as well. Allan Etmanski back on the Boys in the Booth podcast. Allan, how are you this morning, brother?
I'm great. I think that most of Montreal is over the shock and awe of that draft last week, and I think they can all start to move forward with development camps going and building some excitement now.
You can tell Harper just woke up from a nap when he's asking good morning or how's your morning going at 6 p.m.
Hey, listen, I'm going to give the guy the benefit of the doubt. He's a morning show host. So he's up at 4 a.m. and then he's got a nap in there. So it's like second morning for him right now.
You also forgot one of your most important credits, which is the biggest shit talker in the Boys in the Booth fantasy chat.
I never pass up an opportunity to throw some jabs in there.
Yeah.
Well, Allan, first of all, thanks for coming on. We love chatting with you, and we're going to talk about the Montreal Canadiens and their draft weekend, and then obviously your boy Shane Wright out of Kingston. So let's start with the Habs, and we'll go with the low hanging fruit here, and your thoughts on the number one pick and going with the big Slovak winger in your eyes, Slafkovsky at number one overall.
I wasn't as shocked as some people. There were rumblings earlier in the week that they might be leaning towards him or not going with Shane Wright. And so you kind of explore that a little bit and find out that there's smoke. I think I told Chad. I think I sent Chad a message. I'm like, There's some smoke there. And then they wound up taking him. And he's something that Montreal has had trouble finding over the years, a guy that can produce and has size. And usually it's either he can produce and he's smaller or he's got size and he doesn't produce. But with Slafkovsky, it seems like he's got both of those anyways from the track record. And he's only 18 years old, 6'4", 220 pounds. Like there's a lot to like there. And then they kicked off development camp and they showed like clips of him doing the energy or the bike that they do. And like the guy is almost like ripping the bike right off the ground as he's doing his sprints on it. And I was like, all right, let's go.
Yeah, his combine was great, the physical stuff, but I also loved listening to his interviews. He had this he was so certain in himself that it wasn't like arrogancy, but he was certain in himself and in his abilities and that he was going to be the best player in this draft. And that's what he said is that, when I retire, I want to be known as the best player that was in this draft. Well, now he went first overall, so he's really got to prove that.
Well, and I liked his quote leading up to the draft where he was like, okay, Montreal better draft me or I'm going to fill the net against them. And I like immediately everybody made the Pavel Zadina comparison, but it's fair. Like if a player like that goes, more often than not, he comes back against Montreal and burns them. Yeah, and there's multiple examples of it throughout the league. It's just the way that the cookie crumbles when it comes to the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, I'm going to fear Shane Wright every time he plays New Jersey now. But I just remember throughout the whole year, everyone in Montreal is saying the price is right. Well, I think they should have been saying slack off for Slafkovsky.
Oh, that's the first time I've heard that one, Case. How long did that take in the old brain box? I just
pulled that out of my ass when we were calling Allan in here.
That was good.
Attach the trademark to that one. That was great.
So, Allan, I wanted to ask, I mean, I know we talked a few days before the draft, and that's what you said, there's some smoke there. I'm not really sure who they're going to take, but were you disappointed, first of all, that you didn't get Shane Wright, the guy that you've been watching for years in Kingston?
I would have loved to get Shane Wright, and probably it's a little selfish of me as a Habs fan because I was there in Kingston when he came into the league and did one of his first interviews, and I've seen him, so I know what he's capable of. But when you take a step back and you look at the entire body of work, it's easy to see why maybe he didn't go as high as he thought. And the one thing that's probably a detriment to him is that he was one of those few exceptional players where all along he's been told how good he is, how good he is, how good he was, and never really faced any adversity, I guess you would say. And that's one of the things that Slafkovsky had going for him, is that he's faced adversity and he's faced his shortcomings, but he's dealt with them head on. And whereas Shane Wright, it's almost like everybody else wanted to cover them up for him. like even last year, everybody was quick to come out, and myself too, just talk about how he's doing other things better, or these aspects of his game have improved. And I think it sheltered him a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Allan, I want to move on to the two trades that the Habs made. I mean, what an opening draft for Kent Hughes. First time as a GM, and with the draft in Montreal, like, oh man, it was electric watching it. You know, they make the big splash with the number 1 pick, and then the 2 deals. And so I think there were a lot of people that were surprised by both deals, sending Alexander Romanov to the New York Islanders and then acquiring Kirby Dach from the Blackhawks. So I want to start with the Romanov deal, a guy that had a pretty good season, a physical defenseman, and was kind of starting to become a fan favorite in Montreal. Were you surprised by that deal? What are your thoughts?
A little bit I was. He seemed to be in their plans moving forward, but whether something rubbed them the wrong way over the last year or he expressed interest to go elsewhere, it seemed that it was kind of like a mutual splitting where they could find. It was one of those hockey trades where it helps everybody, and it really played into them, I think, selecting Slafkovsky, because now all of a sudden you've got Kirby Dach, who's going to be a center for you, which opens up the option to go and draft on the wing.
Yeah, that made total sense to me. Like when they took Slafkovsky, it was almost like, okay, something has to be in place now for a center, because you know it was a toss up between the two at number 1, obviously, and like that was going into it. We weren't really sure who was even going to get picked, and I don't think even the players knew until the names were called. That's what it seemed like. So as soon as Montreal made the pick, it was like, okay, what's next? And I'm so happy that Hughes was able to get that done, because you know, how long or like how many drafts in a row have we seen where it's just kind of quiet, no major deals? Not this year, guys. This year was an exciting draft. Probably one of the best I've watched.
It was a best case scenario for the NHL, because the last 2 drafts have been online, right? So there's not a lot of hype over it. Players aren't going and doing the walk down from the crowd with their agents and all that stuff. So the NHL really had to hit a home run this year. And Ken Hughes kicked it off with a bang, and then it was off and running. And kudos to Gary Bettman for playing the role of the heel to a T. There's nobody that does it better than him.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure. And quick, Allan, just a thought on Kirby Dach, and what excites you the most about him coming to Montreal?
The upside excites me a lot about him. It's definitely a move where it's high risk, high reward, because there's a lot at stake for them if he doesn't pan out, and there's a hope that he can get back to what he showed flashes of, I think, 2 years ago. If it doesn't, well, then everybody's going to say, well, Ken Hughes isn't the guy for this job, and they're going to cite that deal and the drafting of Slafkovsky. But I think that you look at him, and there's a lot of reason to think that he will regain his form. Chicago was pretty much a mess the last year and a half. They had on ice struggles, but they also had a lot of stuff going on off the ice. So to get him out of there, get him a fresh start, and Montreal, they're pretty much starting fresh with Kent Hughes, Jeff Gordon, Marty St. Louis. It's a new regime it's a new aura around the team. So I think that could help him find his stride again. Yeah,
I think the scare there maybe is it like the way his career has started. It kind of stinks of Ryan Strome or Dylan Strome rather, and you're just worried that it's going to turn out that way. Kind of the big World Junior player that everyone loved in the juniors and was, well, he didn't play in the U20s, but I mean, he was the guy. We were all excited for him. He had a great rookie year and then an injury, and it's like, which way is he going to go? And that's the exciting part of this trade. Is I think that he's gonna really pan out. He's got a lot of upside and some. Well,
and he gets to play with a guy. He's going to be right slotted in behind Nick Suzuki, which is exciting for him. He gets to play along with Cole Caulfield, and then you look at some of these draft picks. They got Hudson on a steal, who's very much in the same. He's kind of a Cole Caulfield to me. If you look at him, the way he's built, you could be getting Cole Caulfield 2.0 and then Owen Beck just inside of the second round. Like, there's a lot of good high-end draft picks made by the Montreal Canadiens in this draft.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Allan, what, like, talking about all the players then that the Habs have, what do you think the top 6 shapes up to be next year? Does Slafkovsky play right away? Does he play top 6 minutes? Like, how do you see it shaking out? Best case scenario.
That's a hard one because he's never, like, the thing with Slafkovsky, and this is maybe the one thing that is the reason I would have liked Shane Wright over Slafkovsky, is that Wright would have had the closest thing to what an NHL schedule would have been, where you're practicing every day, you're playing 3 and 4, 2 and 3, traveling all over the place. And I don't think Slafkovsky has ever had that. He's played a lot of hockey, but I think when I was looking, the most games he played in a year was 50 or something, and travel over in Europe is very, very, it's not like it is in the OHL where you're all over the place. And so that's going to be interesting to see. And it wouldn't shock me if he wound up in Laval. I think he can go. I'm not sure what the rules are anymore. They've changed them over the last time, but I think he can wind up in Laval and get some seasoning. I think it's only the major junior guys that have to go back to their junior clubs. And so it wouldn't shock me if he starts in Laval and they just kind of ease him in, because it will be a big jump for him. And it's the speed is a huge step as well. And a lot of players struggle with that, and that's the one thing when you talk to them, they say the speed, and it will take him a while to get up to it. He's got the size, he's got the skills, but now can he put it all together with the speed?
Yeah, and that's what he said he was working on the most the last 2 years was his speed. That's why he went to Finland. But it doesn't matter how much you work on it out there when you get into a North American rink and have to dodge 30-year-old 6'5", 230-pound defenseman.
But it may benefit him in that regard, whereas he's been working on it on the bigger rinks and covering more space. So now you're in that enclosed area, and it might help him out.
Yeah, the thing I've heard a lot about him is his puck protection, and that's something you need to hear from one of these large wingers that you're drafting. It's you need to have puck protection, especially when he gets into the corners. So.
Yeah, it's all about knowing how to use your frame. Like, there's some guys out there who are 6'3", 6'4", and you'd never know. You'd think they're 5'10", 5'11". But if you've got a guy who can really go in those corners and win those battles and come out with it, it's going to make life for your centerman a lot easier.
And it takes a while, right, for guys as big as Slafkovsky to figure it out, to fill into that big frame. But I mean, he looks like he's sped up the process already, and it's going to be interesting to see how he does at the NHL level. So no, love the player, and makes a lot of sense for the Habs. And to wrap up the talk about Montreal, Allan, obviously we've got free agency opening on Wednesday. We saw Michael Pezzetta get a 1-year extension today. I was kind of surprised that they chose not to give a qualifying offer to Rem Pitlick. I thought that he was a pretty good player for them, and they decided not to qualify Cale Clegg as well. So just your thoughts on that, and what you expect the rest of the way here from the Habs as we get into free agency.
So it's interesting you bring up the qualifying offers, because I think a lot of that has to do with the arbitration rights. And so if they qualify them, then down the road they're eligible for arbitration, which means that they'll get a pay raise, and Montreal's going to be a team that's very much in some cap trouble moving forward. So this way, with no qualifying offer, they still can go and sign him, but at a lesser dollar value. And I think they will. I think they'll probably hold on. They didn't qualify Josh Brook either.
Right.
But I just think that it's going to be a deal that they make where they get a bargain and then sign them to a bigger deal down the road. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense for sure. And Allan, just going back to Shane Wright, a young man who you've gotten to know very well, covering the Kingston Frontenacs. And so, did you text him or get in touch with him at all after he fell to number 4 to Seattle? And just how excited are you for him, for this opportunity to be a number 1 or 2 center with that organization for a very long time, along with Matty Beniers?
I thought about it, but then he's got so much going on, and he would have been a little disappointed after dropping, so I just left it. But there's a big Kingston connection to the Seattle Kraken as well. They've got off the top of my head, they've got John Goodwin, who used to be involved with the Frontenacs. They've got Mike Dawson in scouting, who used to be a Kingston Frontenac. Paul McFarland is there, and Chris McDonald, who's a former coach, is also there. So it makes a lot of sense that they would have seen him a ton. And I know towards the end of the North Bay series, it wasn't uncommon to see Ron Francis at the France games in Kingston. And they made it known that they liked him and were hoping they would get the opportunity to draft. I don't think they thought they would actually get it, but hey, it's a good spot for him to go, a team on the up and up. And they have some depth at center now with Shane and all the other guys that they've got drafted. And I think the future for the Seattle Kraken is looking better than their debut season. That's for sure. And thankfully for Chad, they might even win a series before his beloved Leafs.
They probably will. They probably will.
They didn't really pick up a guy, and no one blew up in their first season that became the guy. They don't have their franchise guy that they're going to do all of the big advertisements with and, slap his face on everything. Well, I think they just got their guy in this draft because we all expected him to go 1 overall. So that's huge.
And they didn't waste any time. They had it right out. Right after they drafted him, they had him with a stick and the jersey on. They had him out to the Seattle Mariners game on the weekend, which happened to be against Toronto, which was great timing on their part. And now he's over there at the development camp.
And the day after he got drafted, too, signed a huge deal with Warrior just right away. So now he's a Warrior athlete. And so actually, if you see on draft day, so this might have been in place before. This was just something I picked up. I thought it was cool. On like Facebook, Instagram, whatever, the NHL posted a bunch of photos like of the guys, sitting on a chair with an old stick and some old skates, like a vintagey draft day photo, right? All the guys had a vintage stick in their hands. Shane Wright was the only guy with a modern stick, and guess what? It was a brand new Warrior because he just signed his deal that day. So I thought that was pretty cool. And Alan, I also thought it was funny as you were mentioning the connections that Seattle has to Kingston. Harper was the only one like nodding along and going, "Oh yeah," like he knew that. Casey and I were here like, we'll believe you, like we're not going to object. We'll believe you,
I could have thrown out any names and you would be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I do want to mention too about Montreal's draft. So we were talking about Slafkovsky being their first overall draft, but then later on, 26th overall, they draft like his best friend from Slovakia, which was very, very cool because they were in the process of drafting him, but they had Slafkovsky in the Habs room going through and taking a look at the room, and they've got his jersey hanging up. Then all of a sudden he sees his buddy Philippe Michar's jersey hanging there, and he just kind of looks. He goes, "Really?" He goes, "This other Slovak?" He goes, "That's my friend."
That's huge.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. And we were, before you came on, Alan, we were just saying how amazing this weekend was for Slovak hockey and how there were 6 guys in total from Slovakia drafted this past weekend. 3 of them go in the first round, 2 of them go in the top 2, and Slafkovsky and Nemec. So it's just great to see other hockey countries have that kind of success and have those results. Even though we're Canadian boys, it's great to see other countries evolve.
It's great for the game.
Yeah, it's great for the game. Like, how boring is it when you watch Canada versus like Latvia and they just smoke them? It's not good for anybody. The guys are padding their stats. They're not learning anything. So now that you see the gap between Canada and other countries closing, it's great for the overall health of the game. We've seen it at the women's game over the last few years, and even now the men's game is starting to see that evolve. And each year you see each of these countries, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, even Latvia, I'll give them some credit. They started to take strides, and it's making for an overall better product.
Yeah, it seems like every year now, even Austria is putting a first round pick player out there, and it's getting exciting. And there has been a few upsets in the last couple of years. Slovakia did really well 2 years ago, and I think they're going to do even better next year with some of the guys, this summer rather, with some of the guys that they have available to play with them. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Alan,
that's one of the things I liked about the Olympics was that we saw what a lot of these other countries had with the exclusion of NHLers, right? Like, a lot of these countries have guys who are fantastic hockey players. Maybe they're not in the NHL, they're playing pro back home, and we don't necessarily know about them, but the Olympics opens our eyes just to see what's out there.
Alan, I'm glad you brought that up, the Olympics, because I wanted to ask you that question about Slafkovsky. Did the lack of production in the Liga, does that worry you as a fan or as a guy who pays attention to the game? When you see his Olympic stats, like, does the sample size worry you a bit about Slafkovsky?
It's a little bit of a concern, and I know I can't remember if I said it to you guys or what, but he said, I'm going to fill the net against Montreal if they don't draft me. I said, well, hey, I just like him to fill the net in La Liga first, but he's going to have a lot more resources with the Montreal Canadiens than he would have over there. Like, they've got dedicated skills guys who are the best of the best over here, and you look at some of the guys that are involved in Montreal now, especially Vincent Lecavalier. Like, he's going to be involved in the development of the Montreal Canadiens prospects, and him and Lecavalier, and I say him, I mean Slafkovsky, both built kind of the same way. So it's nice for him to be able to have a player like Lecavalier to learn from, whereas he may not have that over in La Liga.
And this is a bit of an impossible question, but I have to ask it because a buddy of mine asked it today to me, and I didn't really know how to answer it because I wasn't sure. But if you were to predict next season, who you think has more points in the NHL? Do you think it's Juraj Slafkovsky or Shane Wright?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think Shane Wright probably has more points next season, just because I think that with the shape of Seattle and the direction they're heading, he's going to get a larger opportunity right off the hop. Slafkovsky, I think it's going to be a bit of touch and go early on with him before he gets into a regular shift. And so I think that probably he might struggle early on to produce, but I think with the way Montreal's headed and they really want to build something, I think down the road he'll be a strong producer for the Habs.
Okay.
That's a really good point about about going with Wright, because Seattle's got a ton of cap space and they are looking to add offense. They've been tied to John Klingberg on the back end, but who knows who Shane Wright's wingers are going to be? And so they could go out and spend some money and add a couple of guys who can put the puck in the back of the net, and that's just going to pad the stats for Shane Wright. So I could see it going that way for sure.
And I just have one more question to Allan, and then I'm finished. Like, I don't know how much more you guys have, but I just have one more. If you could sum into maybe one sentence why you think Shane Wright fell to fourth, let me know. Can you do that?
I think I think it has to do with this year and the ups and downs that he experienced and how those were navigated by him. I think Slafkovsky was very forthcoming with his weaknesses and addressed them better, whereas I think it rattled Shane Wright a little bit.
Okay, that's a good answer. Fair enough.
That's a great answer.
In fairness, Chad, I would say, and kind of, I think it goes in line with what Allan said, it had a lot to do with the other three guys than it did Shane Wright in my mind. I think that they all stepped up huge this year. There's a few times where we heard Logan Cooley was going to go first overall. He's the most talented player in this draft. He's a little undersized, so we expect him to go third. And then Slafkovsky stepped up huge in the Olympics. And Simon Nemec, he's a defenseman. The Devils needed a defenseman. They didn't need another centerman, or they didn't want another centerman. You always need another one. So I was a little confused there. But I think it's a lot to do with the other three guys than it is Shane Wright.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's always easier to gain ground for that number one spot than it is to hold on to it. So those guys behind him, it's easier for them to catch him than it is for Shane Wright to hold on to it. All year they're like, Shane Wright's number one, Shane Wright's number one. Well, what else can you do after the consensus number one pick? Well, there's nowhere to go. Meanwhile, those other guys can all catch up to you.
Yeah, and I think, the best example of that is Nolan Patrick. He was the number one pick for the longest time. He sure had a huge World Juniors for Switzerland, and then he took a spot.
Yep, exactly. All right, fellas, anything else for Allan here before we wrap up?
That's all I've got.
I think that's it.
Perfect. Well, Allan, we were talking about it earlier, but you need to come down to Beeville, my friend, and we need to try some Thousand Islands pizza. You need to give one of your reviews, and we can have some pints as well in person. So we need to do that, my friend.
All right, that sounds good to me, Harper.
Thank you so much, as always, for coming on the pod. It's always a pleasure, and enjoy the start of free agency on Wednesday, man.
I can't wait. It should be wild, especially now that Malkin is out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Some crazy names out there for the first time in a long time.
Yep.
Yep. The off-season craziness continues. Anyway, Allan, thanks so much and all the best, man. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, guys.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.